Hi, everyone, and welcome to Treks Through Time. I am your host and FreightWaves Deputy Editor, Brielle Jekyll, and I'm here to tell you about some of the most interesting stories throughout history in transportation and freight. And today we really embark on a captivating journey to uncover the secrets surrounding one of history's greatest maritime mysteries, the Mary Celeste. Now, on December 5th, 1872, a sight both eerie and kind of strange unfolded upon the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. The British brigantine Mary Celeste was discovered adrift and deserted by her crew, almost like she was plucked from existence by an unseen force. What happened aboard the ship? Where did the crew vanish? Why was the ship left intact but completely abandoned? We really don't know. So today we will sail through time to explore the events leading up to this discovery of the ill-fated vessel. The story begins with the ship's final departure from New York Harbor, destined for Italy, carrying a cargo of industrial alcohol. And the voyage seemed really ordinary, but it ended up being one of the strangest things to happen in maritime history, like I said. After approximately a month at sea, a passing ship spotted the Mary Celeste drifting aimlessly in the waters, expecting to offer assistance to a distressed vessel. So the captain and crew of the ship were met with a really unsettling scene. The Mary Celeste was completely silent, a ghost ship just sailing the seas by herself, and the sails were partially set. The cargo remained undisturbed, but the lifeboat was missing. The crew, completely gone, vanished without a trace. And there were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of foul play, just a completely empty boat sitting in the ocean, completely full of its cargo. So we today are going to speak with author Valerie Martin, who wrote the nonfiction book, The Ghost of the Mary Celeste, to learn more about this crazy mystery. We'll dig deeper into this ongoing mystery and explore the various theories put forth to explain why the crew disappeared. Was it piracy? Was it mutiny? Maybe a catastrophic event that forced everyone to abandon ship? Or maybe even it was natural forces that played a role, leaving the Mary Celeste adrift with her crew lost in the realm of the unknown. Well, Miss Martin will take us into her research and through historical records and the captivating tales that have been woven throughout the years. We'll find out some of the theories and some of the evidence that she found along the way. So let's hear what she has to say now. Hi, everyone. I am here with Valerie Martin, who is the author of The Ghost of the Mary Celeste, which is a really interesting story based on it is a true story of a very crazy story at sea that I'm very excited to share with you all today. Hi, Valerie. Thank you so much for coming on.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, so first, I just want to, before we get into the details of the story, because it's such a wild story, I want to know what inspired you to write about the book of the Mary Celeste in particular.
Well, I grew up in New Orleans, and my dad was a sea captain, so I didn't see him a lot. And I think I was probably in about fourth grade. And I read in my weekly reader at school, we had little magazines that had stories of all kinds. Spooky stories were very popular. Mm-hmm. And I read the brief story that they gave about the Mary Celeste, a ship that was found at sea in good condition, but no one was on it. So when I went home, it just happened to be a time when my dad was home. And so I asked him if he knew anything about it. And that was probably the first time in my life that I ever had my father's complete attention. It was really it made the story stick in my mind that it interested him so much. So there it was just in my head over the years. And then I was doing some research on something else, and I came across the fact that Arthur Conan Doyle had written a story about the Mary Celeste. It was one of his first stories before he invented Sherlock Holmes. And it was a totally ridiculous fabrication of what might have happened. He had heard the story when he was a young man. And it was published without his name on it because it was published in a magazine in which all stories were anonymous. So it was a while before people even knew that he wrote that story, but eventually it got collected with his other stories. So those two things, the fact that I kind of knew about the story and that I had written a book that took place in that period. I knew pretty much about that period, how people lived, what they did. I just began to think, well, let me take a stab at it and see what I can find out. So that was what drew me to decide that I was going to write the story.
That's such an. I'm excited by the fact that you grew up in New Orleans. I think that's really cool, and that you have like a personal connection to the state. But
I'm terrified of water, and I would never go in a boat.
Oh, really? No way.
Yeah.
That's funny. I grew up on boats, and now all of a sudden I do get really nervous when my dad starts going super fast.
Boats are scary.
They are. Well, and then this story will prove it. So why don't you get into the story a little bit and tell us what makes this story so unique?
Well, in some ways it was not unique. There were lots of ghost ships, as they called them, empty ships floating around in that period. But what was unique about it was just the circumstances of how it was found, and it's in some ways who found it and who was on it, and why they were never able to figure out why the crew left. So let me start the story. It starts it was in November of 1872 when the ship left, the Mary Celeste left from New York, headed for Genoa. It was a fairly standard sort of trip. The captain was a very seasoned captain from the town of Marion, Massachusetts, where everybody went to sea. The graveyards there are just heartbreaking because it's all these, mostly men, but some women and children. And for a cause or on a grave, it says LAS, lost at sea. It was that common for people to go to sea and not come back. Benjamin himself had lost his brother, sister-in-law, and a little niece just the year before in a ship crash that took place somewhat north of there. So, but that's what he was. He was a sea captain, and his wife wanted to go with him on this trip for various reasons. She had traveled with him before. She hated going to sea, but she had a 2-year-old daughter and wanted to take her with them. So they all decided that the family was on the ship, and they were carrying 1,700 barrels of alcohol. And it was not drinking alcohol. It was the kind of alcohol you use to enhance spirits, but it was like rummy alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And that might give you pause. I mean, it's. I was thinking about, you're having a website about freight. Why is it necessary to move 1,700 barrels of alcohol from New York to Geneva when alcohol is it's something you make in a lab,
right?
So it's one of those many vagaries of freight that was something that was fairly common for that kind of a load to be put on a very small ship. The barrels must have been in there so tight that nobody could go down there once they got it all in, which was kind of fed into the mystery, as I'll explain. So off he sailed and was out about 2 weeks. And then on December the 4th in 1872, so not just a few weeks, another ship that had left 8 days behind him and was captained by a friend of his, whose name was Morehouse, and they had had dinner together before Benjamin took off on the Mary Celeste, spotted the ship and recognized his friend's ship just floating around off the coast of Genoa, about 800 miles out there, way out there, off the coast of the Azores. And it just made no sense, so they drew up to it, and he sent a couple of sailors on to the ship to see what was going on, and they found that there was no one on it, although it was perfectly seaworthy, and who they had left in a hurry. Clearly, they'd taken the chronometer. The longboat was gone. They'd taken the chronometer and the sextant. The last log entry was 10 days before they found the ship. There was a pump that had been disassembled lying on the deck, but there was just nothing wrong with the ship. There was no message. They appeared to have left in a really big hurry.
But they didn't vanish. There was stuff taken, so there were signs that they clearly left them.
Yes, there were signs that they got into the boat. Although there was counter stories that came along later that said there was no lifeboat on that ship. So that's where we start to get the theories that include things like giant octopus.
Right.
Because it really was a serious puzzle about what happened, and basically it's never been solved.
Did they investigate or?
Yeah, what happened was Captain Morehouse put 2 sailors on the ship, and they brought it into Genoa, 800 miles alone, just 2 guys running this pretty good-sized ship. If you sail, you know how really horrific that must have been. They'd had a terrible crossing. The weather had been really, really bad all the way and continued to be bad. But they got it into Genoa to claim salvage because the alcohol was still there waiting to be delivered. So they didn't bring it to Genoa. I'm sorry. They took it to Gibraltar, to the Admiralty Court. So the Admiralty Court investigated. And their first thought was that the salvagers had actually killed all the people on the ship in order to bring it in and claim salvage, which makes no sense because the captain of the Dea Gracia, that was the other ship, was a friend of Benjamin Briggs. And but they did claim salvage. They didn't. Ultimately, they didn't. They only got a percentage of what they would normally have gotten. And the alcohol was unloaded and taken to Genoa, and the trip was concluded.
Wow. So, what are some other theories? You know we have that theory that they wanted to claim the salvage, but what are besides a giant octopus?
Yeah, pirates is a theory, but nothing was stolen, so probably not pirates. But there were pirates. One was a group hallucination caused by a bread fungus because they found some bread that was moldy. Another was that the captain had committed suicide and everybody fell against each other and somehow all managed to kill each other and go overboard. A mutiny was a possibility, but why would there be nobody on the ship and where did the mutineers go? Didn't make much sense. So let's see what else we had. The giant octopus. One theory was that in this area of the ocean, sometimes there were basically an island that would rise up and ships would get stuck on it. And they could get out and walk. That happened, that an island rose up. Everybody got off the ship to take a stroll, and then the island went down and the ship went away. That's pretty far-fetched. And of course, another possibility is aliens.
Right.
Always. Yeah, so those are some.
What's your favorite?
Well, I came to think, and that's what my book is about, because of everything I read about Benjamin Briggs. He was a really upright person. He didn't drink, and he was a really good sailor and a good captain. And what happened seemed to have happened in a panic, and he just wasn't the kind of captain who would panic. My dad's ship caught on fire out at sea once, and he had to sail it into Spain with the flames coming out of the top of it while they brought in all the fire engines. He kept a cool head. So they tried to suggest that because the alcohol was leaking a little bit, it leaked about 300 gallons, that the fumes either blew off the deck top or just they could smell the fumes, and that they panicked, got in the ship, got in a little boat, and sailed away.
Oh.
But I just don't think that he would do that. That was what I finally concluded. So my conclusion was that he was not on the ship, and that was the only thing that I concluded. And I didn't know what happened afterwards. But we do know that it was horrific crossing, and people got blown off of ships.
Oh, so it was really difficult.
Oh, yeah. They had a really bad, and it's interesting now that we know exactly what the weather was like, and we know how far off course he was. He also didn't know where he was because his logbook entry and the chronometer didn't match, and he was about 120 miles further east than he thought he was. So he didn't know where he was. He was lost.
Oh, wow. So that's really all we know is that they were lost. The cargo was there, and they took some stuff with them.
Yeah, and then no sign of him was ever found.
That is so wild, and I want to know what happened.
Yeah, I know. I certainly have read everything I could find out about what might have happened, and there are a lot of theories. I finally came to believe that for some reason or another, they were frightened and got on the ship. A detail is that there was a rope hanging off the back of the ship that was just torn. Basically, it looked like it had just been, you couldn't tell whether it was cut or worn or what, but it was torn. And if they, as one captain posited, if they had got into the longboat and hooked it to the back of the ship because they weren't sure what was going on, and the wind picked up, which it did, they know that that was a very windy day. It could have ripped the cord, and then they were gone.
Oh, okay.
And that seems feasible. Mm-hmm. And then because it was horrible seas, the little ship went down.
Right. So were there any lasting effects on the shipping industry after that? Like, did anyone think like maybe we should keep better records or I don't know?
Yeah, I don't think there really were. I mean, because of this fact that there were ghost ships floating around, but those were all ships that people knew what went wrong.
Right.
And there was one that Conrad writes about that people saw in the Atlantic for years, just kind of wandering around, this very large empty ship. There's still empty ships floating around at sea. Mm-hmm. Probably some big old tankers are out there, just floating around. The sea is a scary beast. So I don't think it changed a lot. I don't think they stopped shipping dangerous fluids.
Right. So,
yeah, I don't think too much. I think it changed the world of the Briggs family.
Right.
Because they lost, they lost so many that the grandmother lived to be, 100 or something, but she survived probably 10 of her family members.
Oh, my God.
Although her husband was a captain, and he died of being struck by lightning in the living room.
Of all the things, this family's unlucky.
Yeah, after all his sea voyages, he'd made many. He'd lost both his sons at sea.
Oh, that's terrible. So what, in your research, was there any lesser known details or aspects that were particularly really intriguing to you?
Let me think. I guess what intrigued me was that Arthur Conan Doyle would step in and decide that he was going to solve the mystery. And the way he solved the mystery was really outrageous. He solves it by saying that at the very last possible minute when they were leaving New York, a kind of elegant, maybe, and seemingly very intelligent black man asked for passage, and they gave it to him. And then in the story, he's constantly adjusting the chronometer, and they don't know where they're going. that suggested to me that Dole did a lot of research because he had read all the records that came out of the Admiralty Court, and he knew that they were sailing where they should not have been, that they were off course. So what he has happening is this black sailor, this black man, elegant man, I can't remember his name, is actually the lost king of an African tribe, and he's trying to get back to Africa. And he gradually kills everybody on the ship one by one, and then sails it into Africa. It's a real colonialist fantasy of the most disgusting order. But so, that was a detail that really fascinated me.
That's interesting. Did your research make you even more scared of the sea?
Oh, yes, definitely. Really, I didn't like it before, but now, this recent story we have of people who would pay $250,000 to get into a bathtub and go down to find the Titanic makes you think, what is the attraction of the sea?
Oh my God, I know that
everything it is says stay away.
Yeah. I mean, and that just shows how that captivated the world. Like everyone's been watching this story. It's
mm-hmm. It's such a folly,
Yeah.
And the adventurers at sea are full of these stories of people who, this story is not a folly. These were just people trying to do their job and make a living. The saddest part is that Benjamin and Sarah were hoping that he would not have to sail again. They wanted to retire. This was going to be their last trip.
Do you know how many stories I cover that's a detail in? It's crazy. I mean, it's almost every tragedy I cover has somebody on board that this was their last time.
Yeah. And, isn't that strange? Yeah, that's true. Of course, they thought it was going to be their last time. And
it was.
Right.
Well, can you tell everyone where they can find your book if they are interested in learning more about this?
Yeah, here's my book. My book right here. Goes to Mary Celeste. You can order it from your local bookstore. It's from Vintage. It's in paper. It's available. You can get it on Amazon, but it's better to go to your local bookstore.
I will absolutely do that. And thank you so much for telling us this story, and thank you for coming on. And
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's such an interesting story, and it's fun to hear all the theories and your research into it.
Yeah, it's a good story, and one of the things that's great about it is I just received a book in the mail a couple of days ago from a young French writer. I met him years ago, and he's written a new book about the Mary Celeste. And it's about a young woman who's the last person to get on the ship, who survives.
Oh, so interesting.
The story goes on.
But
this book is not out yet. It'll be out next year.
Oh, I'll keep an eye out for that as well. Well, thank you again. And thank you everyone for tuning in.
Yes, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much to Miss Martin for coming on and giving us all that insight into such a mystery. And before we go, I do have your fun fact of the day. Did you know that container ships today are so large that an average ship can carry up to 745 million bananas, which actually is roughly one banana for every single person in Europe and North America? That's a lot of bananas and a lot of space. Thanks everyone for listening. If you have any theories about the Mary Celeste, feel free to reach out and let us know. You can follow me on Twitter at JakelBrielle to see what else we have going on at FreightWaves Classics. And you can email me at bjakel@freightwaves.com. And tune in 2 weeks for our next episode on FreightWaves TV, or listen to the show wherever you get your podcasts.